is at 2:30 and she joins me now. Can you do it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what's happened has been that we've only had a week to get the nominations in. There's a large number of MPs who haven't nominated yet, and many of them have wanted to speak to their party members. They wanted to go to the hustings and think about this, because obviously it's a really important decision. But from the conversations that I've had this weekend, I'm fairly confident that so long as I don't get any slippage, I'll be fine. I'm going to get across the line, and then we'll move on to the next stage. It's a long contest, and it'll have its ups and downs. And I've been a slow starter, but I did start from a standing start after the general election.
So why have you been a slow starter? Because you were, as I say, tipped by a lot of people to be the favourite for this, and you're towards the back. What's gone wrong over the last year or two? Well,
no. I don't think anything has gone wrong over the last year or two. I think that we had a very bad election result, and people are in a state of grief. And they need to think very carefully about what happens next. And in the end, it'll be up to 500,000 members to decide at the beginning of April. I was thinking about this morning. I had a really good friend who was, he used to organise the bin men and the dinner ladies and this sort of thing, and he died last year. He'd been a friend of mine for 30 years. He was a councillor. And a mutual friend of ours had gone in to see him on his deathbed, and they were having a gossip, as you do. And he said, "That Emily Thornberry, she's a tough old bird." And I wasn't very flattered when I heard it.
Is that your basic campaign slogan, a tough old bird?
But I wasn't very flattered by it. But, there are lots of us in the Labour Party, and there are lots of us in the trade union movement. And I come from a long line of tough old birds, and there have been lots of tough old birds in the Labour Party. It would be great for there to be one who becomes leader of the Labour Party. But we have several months to make a decision.
Let me put to you a theory about why you might have been in some trouble, which is that you were, above everybody else, probably most associated with the Remain case around Brexit. You were the person who said, this is a Remain party and we're going to prove that Britain is a Remain country. And, of course, exactly the reverse happened. Perhaps on this issue, you're just out of touch.
I think that it was disastrous for us to go into a general election in those circumstances. I accept that. But I really did try to stop us going for a general election. What my view was that you couldn't have a general election over one issue. That was basically a referendum. That what Boris Johnson should have done, we should have held him to account, and we should have said, yes, all right, let's get Brexit done. Let's have a referendum. Let's find out if people like your deal. And then, once we had done that and people had decided one way or the other, it's a really, really big decision, then you have a general election. But by doing what we did, we let him wrap himself up in the lie that he could get Brexit done without a referendum, and he got 5 years in power as a result of it, and that's been a disaster for our country.
If it was, in effect, as you say, a referendum, then at least we know the result. So it leads me to ask, if Emily Thornberry becomes leader of the Labour Party, does the Labour Party become a return to the EU party?
No, I think what we do is we have to be pragmatic and practical about it. We are leaving at the end of January, and I'm afraid, with deep regret, that is what's going to happen. So now the fight has to move on to how are we going to leave? What is the deal going to be? Because, again, the spectre of no deal emerges again, and we might leave at the end of the year with no deal. Not just a no deal with Europe, but also there are a whole load, there's 40 different trade agreements that we have through being in Europe that will also need to be negotiated. So how on earth Boris Johnson really honestly thinks he's going to be able to negotiate all of those things in that time frame is extraordinary. And we have to hold him to account on that. Basically, this is what he's promised. That's what he has to do. We will, of course, do our best to try to ensure that we get the best possible deal. We'll fight him in the Commons. I will fight him at the dispatch box and hold him to account on that. But, they have the votes, and it'll be... And if it goes as badly as I genuinely fear it will, he has to own that, and he has to take responsibility for it. There is no shirking this. He has decided this is the way forward, and having got this majority, it's a bit like universal credit. When I was Social Security Minister, Shadow Social Security Minister, I fought universal credit. I pointed out all the difficulties that there were going to be. Okay. And you have all these votes, but if you don't have the numbers, you're not able to amend the legislation.
Now, there's one thing that's hung around your neck now, as you know, for several years, which is a single tweet you put out, I think in 2015. We can see it here. It's famously, it's the St George's Cross flying, and you appeared to be sneering at the people who put that flag out, and it's never been quite forgotten.
Well, the mistake I made, and I made a mistake, was, I took a photograph of a house that was covered in flags many months after the World Cup. I was taking a series of photographs during a by-election in order to explain to people what a by-election is like. And I was asked to resign. I did. I was asked not to make any comment. I did. That was my mistake, because there isn't.
You should have explained yourself.
Well, yeah,
at the
because
time.
there isn't any commentary on that. And so what happened was that people put their own prejudices into that and said, I was doing this and I was doing that. And the truth of the matter, the truth of the matter is that I was brought up on a council estate, a house that looks very similar to this. My brother was a builder until he had an accident. You know, I've got a sister who's a bus driver. You know, I don't sneer at people. I mean, it's not fair to say it. I am a successful woman, but I have had a struggle getting here. But I have been successful, and I'm proud of that. And actually, if the Labour Party is not proud of people who are successful, what are we about?
So there's two North London successful lawyers in contention in this debate. Why do you think Keir Starmer is so far ahead at the moment?
I think, as I say, I think there's a little bit of, you know, we had a very bad election result and people wanted to make they said we mustn't do that again. And who would be a safe pair of hands in those circumstances? And then once these things get a momentum, then they continue. But, you know, the contest is not a week long. Okay. The contest is many months. And we'll see, you know, when it opens up and when people are able to breathe and look at the situation and think to the future as opposed to their deep grief about the past, then I think that it'll open up much more.
If you get it,
yes.
At some point, you're going to have to sit about as close to Donald Trump as you're sitting to me. You have described him as a sexual predator and a racist.
And an asteroid of awfulness.
And indeed, after those very, very vivid oppositionist phrases, how could you possibly do business with him?
I think the thing about bullies is that you have to stand up to them. I think you shouldn't be afraid. I think, you know, you could do a Theresa May. I mean, I could hold his hand and hold his hand, or I could do a Boris Johnson and do a sort of Donald Trump mini-me tribute act. But no, what you do with bullies is you stand up to them and you say, this is wrong, you shouldn't do this, you are destabilising the world, what you have done in Iran is wrong, you can't play brinkmanship like this, it is the future of the planet you're talking about, you shouldn't be denying climate change. You just say it, and in the end, I think that's what
there's a wall of
bullies
hostility
say.
between you before you start that conversation. It just sounds a bit like the posture of oppositionist politics rather than governing politics. You can have great vivid phrases, much fun with them, but then you have to deal with the people that you've abused.
I think that what you have to do is you have to be truthful and say it as it is, and that's what I do. OK. Saying it as it is, we've all been observing this big, genuine royal crisis going on at the moment. Yeah. Harry and Meghan in a real debate about what they're going to do, whether they're going to, as it were, leave the royal family and move to Canada and move into the private sector. If that happens, I asked Brandon Lewis this question, do you think there's any circumstances in which the British taxpayer would pay for their security? I think they should pay for the security.
Themselves?
No. I think the British taxpayer should pay for the security of Harry and Meghan and their family, as they do with former ministers. Listen, you know, Harry spent 20 years on the front line in Afghanistan through many tours of duty. He has done great service just on the basis of that. And I just hate to think what he must be thinking now, having used his instinct to try and defend our country. Now he has his much-loved wife and his baby under the type of media scrutiny that they're suffering. Just look at what's in the papers today. 17, 18 pages. He as a man must be really wanting to defend them, and I understand that completely. And I also understand that a young couple really ought to be allowed to make their own decisions about what their future should be. And if they decide they want to go to Canada, of course, they must always be protected.
And what do you think the jeopardy or the peril is for the royal family to lose Harry and Meghan as part of the mainstream royal family?
I would turn my attention more to losing the Queen, actually, who has put in so many decades of service, public service, to our country and who is extremely popular. And when we sing God Save the Queen, actually, many of us now thinking of the age that she is, it's almost personal now, isn't it? And I think that she is rightly highly popular because people look to her and say, you know, look what she has done. And the difficulties that she's going through in her 90s now with her family. You know, it isn't just Harry and Meghan, it's also obviously the great scandal about Prince Andrew. It must be very difficult to be head of a family that has going through the number of problems that they are at the moment. Let's
turn to the other big story in the papers today, which is, of course, Iran.
Yes.
It's looking like a bit of a tinderbox at the moment. If you were leading the Labour Party, if you were in government, and the British ambassador had been grabbed out of a barber's shop and put under imprisonment for a very short period of time, albeit, again, what would you be doing?
So I think what happened was that Rob Macaire arrived at a vigil for the death of the 173 people who were killed on that jet.
Which then became a demonstration against the regime.
And I think that the vigil was a genuine expression by the people of Tehran about deep regret that what had happened, and he joined that. And then it became a demonstration, and he went off to get his hair cut and got grabbed. And they're claiming that he was inciting the riot. I mean, clearly that's just total nonsense. It's in breach of international law. They should not have arrested him. Thankfully, they let him go after 3 hours, but it was obviously totally wrong for them to do so. The trouble is that when you get an unstable situation like this, and when you get tensions building up, people under stress make really profoundly bad decisions.
So calm down on all sides. Emily Thornberry, we've run out of time, but thanks very much indeed for talking to us.